Թե անին կպի, անին կա։ Գնան դե խադմիսը բան, ռեսեպշնից հացրակ ես 10 Աշ ջան, կան բանջուր տեղը ու ջամ ասում, մոտես։ Ոնց չկարա հենց Կպար
So Peter is still very bad. Peter is still very bad.
Right.
You need to speak through microphone.
Yeah.
That's what the interpreters control.
Yeah. This one is mine or the other one? You think? Okay. If you're sure? Okay.
Տարոն ջան, մի վարքյան կկաս։
Չէ, ես արի որոնց դեղ բացվեն։ Բեյանի գրնանգը սկսել։ Գրնանգը սկսել։ Շադիգո։ Բարև ձեզ, շնորհակալ ենք ձեր ներկայության համար։ Ես Կասպար Ղարաբետյանն եմ, ՕԻՏ Եվրոպայի հայ-իտալիան նախագահն եմ, կողս կգտնվի բարոն Ֆաբիո Մասիմո Կաստալդոն, Իտալիայեն, ինքը Եվրոպական խորհրդարանի անդամ է, նաև նախկին փոխնախագահ մինչև վերջին շրջանը ինքը փոխնախագահ էր։ Մեր պատվիրակությունը փոխկացած էր 3 հոգի է եւ 1 լրագրող է։ Այսօր ներկա վիդեոլար նաև բարոն Պետեր Վանդալենը Նիդերլանդներեն, որ ինքը նաև համանախագահն է եւ համահիմնադիրն է Եվրոպական խորհրդարանեն ներս Արցախի հետ բարեկամության խումբին։ Դժբախտաբար առողջական հարց ունի, հյուրանոցը մնաց եւ չկարողացավ ներկայանալ եւ ներողություն կխնդրել։ Ցեզմե որ չգրցավ ներկայանալ եւ ծեր հարցումներուն պատասխանել։ Բարոն Կաստալդոն կարելությունը պիտի ունենա ինքը պատասխանելու հարցումներուն, ինքը անդամ է թե Արցախի հետ բարեկամության խումբին Եվրոպական խորհրդարանեն ներս եւ թե Հայաստանի հետ բարեկամության խումբին Եվրոպական խորհրդարանեն ներս։ Երրորդ անձը, որ հետերնից էր, Գերմանիայեն բարոն Լարս Բերգներ, որ ստիպեցավ 3 գիշեր մեկնել դվյալը լալով, որ ինքը ուրիշ պատվիրակության մնալ անդամ էր, Եվրոպական խորհրդարանի պատվիրակության անդամ էր, երբ խարգը սկացվեցավ, որ 3 գիշեր մեկնի, որպեսզի այսօր մասնակցի այդ պատվիրակության ևս։ Փոքր ասիմ ներկայացումից հետո նաև տեղեկացնեմ, որ Եվրոպական խորհրդարանեն ներս հաջողած ենք ունենալ Հայաստանի հետ բարեկամության խումբ, մոտավորապես 50 անդամները փոխկացած եւ Արցախի հետ բարեկամության խումբ, որուն համահիմնադիրները մեկը բարոն Պետեր Վանդալենն է, Հայաստանի հետ խումբի նախագահը բարոն Լուկաս Ֆուրլասն է Դիբրոսեն, իսկ Արցախի հետ բարեկամության խումբը 3 համահիմնադիր եւ համանախագահ ունի, Ֆրանսուଆ Ալֆոնսին Ֆրանսիայեն, Սիլվի Գիյոմը Ֆրանսիայեն եւ բարոն Պետեր Վանդալենը Նիդերլանդներեն։ Աս իբրև ներածական ներկայացնեմ նաև ցախ կողմս Հեղինակայինն է, մեր գրասենյակի գործադիր դնորենուին եւ բարոն Կաստալդոյին գողքը բարոն Ուրգասյանն է, Եվրոպայի մեր գրասենյակի, կենտրոնական գրասենյակի աշխատակից։ Իմաս կարճ ներածականից հետո պիտի խնդրեմ բարոն Կաստալդոյին, որ ամփոփ ինքնալ ներածական մնի եւ այդ կետո ծեր դրամատուրգիան դակե ինքնալ եսալ եւ Էվին Էվինյանն ալ ծեր հարցումներում պատասխանելու, եթե աշուշտ գրնանք եւ դերգագին։
Thank you very much, dear Skarspar. Good afternoon, dear friends. Thank you. Let me, first of all, thank very warmly the Armenian authorities, but upon all the Armenian people for the very warm hospitality we received during these days. As probably my friend Kaspar was explaining before, we are here because we truly believe that in this delicate moment for the history of Armenia, it was important to show our presence, our friendship, our solidarity, and also to send the right political messages. We are deeply concerned and we strongly commend and we strongly really condemn the aggression that happened in the last month towards the territorial integrity of the Armenian Republic that were perpetrated by the Azeri authorities together with all the witnesses of the atrocities that has been committed against soldiers that have been captured during this aggression. We truly esteem that those are crimes against humanity, and we hope that the responsible will be held accountable in front of justice for what they did. At the same time, also, we are deeply concerned of this escalation that is happening because as parliamentarians and as Europeans, we believe in a world that should not be ruled by the might of military power, but should be still ruled by a legal order basis, by negotiation, by diplomatic solutions, not by violence, not by coercion. And therefore, it's important for us to continue our commitment that we already expressed in many resolutions that has been proposed by us and voted in the European Parliament with a large majority. I refer, for instance, to the resolution in which we condemn the massive destruction of the cultural heritage, Armenian cultural heritage in Artsakh, the destruction of churches, monasteries, even the destruction of graveyards, just to cancel the millennium presence of the Armenian culture there. But of course, we also condemned the weaponization of the prisoners of war, including the prisoners of the war of 2020, that should have been already released since a long time ago. Those are all negative signs that some authoritarian states are trying to change the borders of states through the use of violence. This, we truly believe, it's unacceptable everywhere in the world, including, of course, in the Caucasus region, including in Armenia. We will continue to struggle to see a more strong attitude of the European Union as defender of the truth and as mediator. Of course, we endorse the fact that a mission was deployed, a monetary observation mission of 40 persons in the line of contact between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but I also truly believe that it would be important that this mission should not be simply a temporary one, but should become a permanent one as long as the situation will require their monitoring, and even I call for an increase of the number of monitor person deployed to ensure that in every single part of in every single land that is at risk, there will be an observer to report what is really happening. Yesterday we were in the Sunik region and we observed what happened to some houses that has been shelled by the artillery of the Azeri armed force. And I think that no people should live under the threat to be aggressed, especially civilians under the threat to be aggressed. And we are here to reiterate the importance, the support that should happen on one side to the Armenian territorial integrity and on the other side to the right of self-determination of the Armenian people in Artsakh. Therefore, once more, let me say that we are concerned also by the agreement, the deal that has been announced by the European President of Commission with Azerbaijan on gas. We truly understand that in this moment of energetic crisis, there is a need of diversification for Europe, but this should not happen bargaining rule of law, bargaining fundamental rights, bargaining the support for democracy with simply the needs of energy supply. Armenia is a pillar of democracy in this region, one of the very few fully democratic states with pluralism, with strong respect, of course, of the political rights of its own citizens, and this is not, of course, the case of many other neighbor states. And I think that that should also be taken fully into account by the action and the diplomatic action of the European Union. Therefore, we'll continue to be extremely attentive and a strong voice within the European Parliament to ensure that the orientation, the proposals of the European Parliament will be fully taken into account, respected also by the European Commission, by the Council of the European Union in their diplomatic actions, and to ensure a coherence not simply among the European institutions, but also, and upon all, with the values and the principles for which the European stands for and on which the European Union has been built. I truly believe that Armenia is also part of the European culture and heritage. I hope that one day Armenia will be able to join also the European family, because I think that Armenia fully belongs to the European family. But in the meanwhile, of course, we have also to show that this commitment, it comes also from concrete action on the European side. And therefore I call to continue the diplomatic efforts to bring back all the solution of the conflicts around the negotiating table, also taking into account that every diplomatic solution should be fair, should be balanced, and should have, as I said, full respect of territorial integrity of the Armenian Republic, and again, once more, respect for the right of self-determination of people in Artsakh. We will be extremely also committed towards the votes of the reports on the EU-Armenia relationship and EU-Azerbaijan relationship that now is in pending discussion in front of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament. And just be reassured that we will use also the very important witnesses, data we were collecting during this fact-finding mission during these days here to ensure that those reports will represent an objective reality and not, of course, simply some political positions that are not fully attached to the reality of the events that are happening in this moment in the country. Once more, thank you very much to all the organizers for this important moment. Thanks to all of you for attention, and I will be absolutely glad to answer to your question. I do apologize, my colleague Peter van Dalen, as Mr. Kasparian was explained, should have taken part to the press conference, but he had some health problems and he could not attend, but I will be at your disposal to answer to any question.
Հիմա ինչպես է բարոն Կաստալդոն արիտ է ուղեկցեր հարցումները, ինքը գարկում հարցեր բարձրացուց, որոնք գարձեն, որ լավ է արձագանքեն մեր մամուլեն մեջ, ընդհանրապես նաև նկատի առնողին մեր թե խորհրդարանական դիվանագիտության կողմը եւ թե նաև բեդության կողմէ, մեր արդակին գործոս նախարարության կողմէ եւ մնացյալ պատկան մարմիններեն, որոնք կսպաղին մեր ասկային հարցերով, բարոն Կաստալդոյին նշած հարցերը չափազանց հիմնական են եւ գուսամ ծեր ջամփովա լադոնք կհասնին ունեցան արդեն հանդիպումներ արդակին գործոս նախարարը նախարարությունը բարոն Կաստալդոն ավելիկանու ում փոխանցեց եւ լսեց տեսակետները երեգասկային արչոր ասկային ժողով հանդիպեցավ թե բարոն Ռուբինյանին այդ որ Թուրքիո այդ բանակցողն է հայկական կողմէ եվրոինտեգրացման հանձնաժողովին հետ եւ ընդդիմության ներկայացումներուն հետ երեգալ ինչպես ասավ Սյունիք գորիս գտնվեցանք հանդիպեցանք Արուշ Արուշանյանին հետ քաղաքապետին հետ Գորիսի եւ նաեւ արիթ ունեցան այցելելու եւ տեսնելու ռմբակոծված քյուրմը եւ խոմբնագարանները, որոնք վնասներ գրած են, այսինքն իրենք այլևս աչքով տեսած վգաներ են, որ Եվրոպա պիտի բերեն։ Ձեր հարցումները խնդրեմ ուսեք, որ լրատվական սպասարկության եք եւ ինքը պիտի պատասխանեք, կամ եթե հարցումը մեզի ուղղված է, մենք կպատասխանենք։
Ես համանում էի ճշտել, արդյոք դուք որմեք հայրեք ձեռնարկի են ձեր երկրում, որպեսզի պատժամիջոցներ կիրառվեն Ադրբեջանի դեմ, քանի որ մենք տեսնում ենք, որ Ֆրանսիայում մասնավորապես տասնյակ քաղաքներում բանաձևեր են ընդունվել պատժամիջոցներ կիրառելու եւ նոյեմբերի 15-ին Փարիզի քաղաքային խորհրդի ընդունած բանաձևը ստենալով է քննարկվելու Ֆրանսիայի պատժամիջոցների մասնավորապես Ադրբեջանի որովհետև մենք տեսնում ենք, որ Եվրոպական խորհրդի կողմից հնչող բազմաթիվ կոչերը ընդդեմ Ադրբեջանի ոչ ինձեր չեն զսպում իրեն։ Այսինքն միայն հնարավոր է պատժամիջոցներով զսպել, ինչպես մենք հասկանում ենք։ Ինչ քայլեր եք դուք ձեռնարկում ձեր երկրում։
Thank you very much for the very pertinent questions. In fact, I truly believe that every geopolitical dimension of the action of the European Union could be considered coherent just if you are not using double standards, just if you are behaving in front of same kind of situation in the same way and not making distinction, not making interpretation, clivage under the different moments. And in fact, if we look at the context, I think that the fact that now Azerbaijan is occupying part of the sovereign lands of the state of Armenia, it is a clear sign of that this part of land has been invaded. It's a matter of fact. And therefore, since the gravity of these attacks and this occupation, I also think that the issue of sanctions should be discussed by the Council of the European Union and by the Commission, simply because, again, not reacting in front of an escalation could bring eventually the aggressor to the idea that it will be unpunished, and then can even foster the aggression in itself. But you must also be aware that for the rule of functioning of the European Union, what it's sticking to the foreign affairs dimension, what is related for the foreign affairs, including sanctions, is decided by the Council of the European Union, not by the Parliament, not by the Commission. So it's decided by the governments of the member states, and especially sanctions can be approved just if there is the unanimity of all the 27 member states. Therefore, that means that even one single state can put a veto and can block any adoption of the sanction. That means that, of course, that will be difficult to find a consensus, but nevertheless, I think that at least personal sanctions against the officers, the military authorities, and the political authorities that gave the order to also execute prisoners of war and to do crimes against humanity should be absolutely discussed and hopefully also adopted by the European Union. That's of course my personal position as member of the European Parliament. Let's hope that it will be possible to find a consensus among the governments, because as I said, the Parliament, unfortunately, in that specific field, can just send a political address. We do not have the power on ourselves to adopt sanctions. We can just ask to the governments of the European Union in the Council to do that, and we do not have, unfortunately, any means to oblige them. But as I reiterate, answering to your question, yes, in my opinion, taking into account the gravity of what happened, absolutely that perspective and that possibility must be discussed within the Council of the European Union.
Ուրիշ հարցումներ եթե կան,
մենք արդեն շուտով 2 ամիս կդրանա, ինչ նույն այնտեղ, որտեղ դուք գնացել եք Սյունիքում, որտեղ տեղի են ունեցել ռազմական գործողություններ, պատերազմական հարձակումը, մենք ունենք անհատ դիակներ, այսինքն դեռ չենք կարողանում վերադարձնել դիակները, որովհետև շնամին պարբերական վերաբերում է սա սուր մարդասիրական տեսանյութերից եթե վերցնենք, ուղղակի պատերազմական ապարդյուն հանցագործությունը եւ դիմադրի պայմաններում անգամ հնարավոր չէ մեր կողմի զինվորներին հանել։ Եվ Եվրամիությունը պարբերաբար տարբեր կոնվենցիաների հղում անելով հենց մարդասիրություն է քանդվում եւ գործում տարածել։ Այս առումով ինչ աշխատանքներ կարող եք անել, որպեսզի արդյունավետ լինի, գոնե կարողանանք մեր մարտիկները հանել։
Let me say once more that what you are underlying, the fact that there are still the bodies of the victims of the Armenian soldiers and victims of these clashes and of this aggression that are not able to be given to their families, to be properly buried. This is another crime that it's not acceptable between countries that are supposed to respect, first of all, the international conventions and commitments in that regard. As you said, there is a ceasefire, and of course during a ceasefire there should be given full access to respect those persons that were killed when they were, of course, just observing and they were doing their duties. And once more, I truly believe that this issue should be raised by the European Union as a mediator between the parties to ensure that both sides, with respect not just one side, it's not by chance, and let me underline also that the mission that has been deployed was supposed to be deployed on both sides of the border, but just Armenia accepted to have the deployment. There was no acceptation, there was no consentment by the Azeri authorities, and therefore half of the activities of the mission are not able to be totally fulfilled for this reason. And this is a sign, once more, of those who like to act in conformity of international law and who like to act in good faith, and some others that are not expressing the same attitudes and the same commitment. I think that, once more, the European Union has the leverage eventually to be more effective, because we are a very significant commercial partner also for Azerbaijan, and if we are going to use all the tools that are in our toolbox, for sure we can achieve some concrete steps. And I truly believe that being really sympathetic and close to the pain, the terrible pain and wounds that these families are suffering, as well as the families of the prisoners of war that are still under custody under the jails within the jails of the Azerbaijan authorities, we can push and put these items very high on the agenda, asking on one side to give fair access and to get this body and ensure proper funerals and respect and commemoration for their family, and also ensure a prompt release of the prisoner of war, of the last clashes, and of course also those one of 2020. Once more, I strongly call the European Union to remind that this is for us not simply a political task or a goal, should be a moral duty for a union that has been built after the terrible wounds of the Second World War, because we know what war means, as war has destroyed also cities, communities, people, and therefore we should also pretend, especially from our partners, to act really in conformity of the principles that are inspiring our actions. So once more, yes, I would like to see more proactivism and more clarity of the action of the European Union in that regard, using all possible tools in our role of mediators to ensure that those will not be simple words, simple commitments that they will all effectively put in place. Yes, as I said before, that mission has been established taking a quota of observers from the Georgian mission at the border with Abkhazia and southern Ossetia. And of course, I truly believe that should be just a first step. Because on one side, I think that the number of observers should be increased. Also because, as you said, there are signs that the aggression could restart. Of course, I strongly call to do all possible actions to prevent a massive attack, but still also border clashes could be very harmful for the population involved. In some cases, they told me that the villages, the communities are not kilometers away from the line of contact. They are meters, hundreds of meters away. So the risk of civilian casualties, the risk again of those people being obliged to flee and to escape as internal displaced person is very high. And our moral duty and political duty is to work to prevent this to happen. And I think that 40 persons, it could be a good start, but it's not probably enough, taking into account the dimension of the border. On the other hand, also, I truly believe that this mission cannot be simply temporary, because this is a long-lasting crisis. The episodes are now increasing in the last years, therefore I think that should become a permanent mission of the European Union. On the other hand, I also think that taking into account the complexity of geopolitical landscapes and the impact that also the Ukrainian invasion perpetrated by the Russian has also in this part of the world, as well as the strong ties between Turkey and Azerbaijan, as well so also of these other effects, it would be important for the European Union to do this joint pressure and effort together with the other countries that would like to join us in that approach. Similarly, of course, thinking about the United States, thinking about the United Kingdom, any other partner that would like to join us in expressing that position should be welcome, because that could increase the leverage on the different sides to achieve the goal of preventing the escalation. This is, in my opinion, fundamental. On one side to protect the people, and the other side also to ensure that there will be a possible ground for fair negotiations. Because you cannot fairly negotiate if you have a gun on your head. This is not a good negotiation. This is blackmailing. It is something different. And therefore, we want absolutely to prevent this possibility, because otherwise that would have an impact, and without a fair negotiation, it is impossible to have a fair result. Well, thank you very much for the question. First of all, as I said, I'm concerned by the declaration that has been done by the President of the Commission, because if I'm aware on one side that in this moment we have a clear, important problem of energy security within Europe, and that problem, trust me, is extremely big in some countries. My country was 40% dependent from the Russian gas. Germany was 60% dependent from the Russian gas. We have 100,000 business company that could simply close, that could have a failure within the next months. So I'm totally aware of this complexity and gravity of the situation. On the other hand, I do not think that should bring us to a certain kind of realpolitik that will deny also the gravity of the situation. And I'm saying that also not simply thinking about what is happening between Azerbaijan and Armenia, but also taking into account what is happening every day to Azeri civil society, because the Azeri civil society is also victim of the action of its own government. There is no freedom of speech, there is no freedom of opinion, and this is also something that Europe should not deny and should not forget. Therefore, once more, I think that these declarations were not really balanced, and diversification and trade relationship should not then somehow block or should not reduce our commitment towards the defense of human rights, towards the protection of multilateralism and diplomatic solution as a mean to solve the conflict. You were saying, of course, then you were asking about more targeting actions. I think I was quite clear before in what I said, speaking about those kind of responsibility to which should be called the perpetrators of any crime against humanity. On the status of Artsakh, I think that, first of all, that should be decided by the inhabitants of Artsakh and should not be imposed again through diplomatic blackmailing. They have the full right to live according to their traditions, according to their vision, according to their origins, and therefore I call for a solution that will ensure these fundamental rights to be respected through possibly, as I said before, fair negotiations and not through pressures that will push somehow those people to be victim of a diplomatic game on their shoulders. What could be that status, I really think that will depend, so on one side of their freedom of expression of their will, and on the other side of course, of the international pressure that should be done on this negotiation to ensure that they will be balanced and they will take in account their interest that must be the first in the list of the diplomatic concern that must be discussed during the negotiation themselves.
Առաջիկային տեղի ունենալու Եվրոպայում Հայաստանի ու Ադրբեջանի մասին զեկույցները, ձեր այցելությունը Հայաստան եւ փաստաբավարարությունը ինչպես է ազդելու այդ զեկույցների վրա։
I really hope so. In any case, I will try, together with the colleagues that are more sensible to this issue, to have a set of amendments that will use the information we were able to acknowledge and to collect during this mission, and to try to have a balanced result. So far, I could say that we discussed the draft report that's been presented by the rapporteur. We are quite satisfied by the report on the EU-Armenia relationship, but we are not satisfied at all with the EU-Azerbaijan relationship because it lacks the analysis of what happened during the last clashes of the last month, and it lacks, of course, one part of the story, I would say, that one of the violences, that one of the discrimination happening, and all the barbaric act towards the prisoner of war. This is also something that a report that will be adopted by the Committee of Foreign Affairs and then by the plenary of the European Parliament cannot afford to skip. And this will, of course, our goal will be to not simply to table those amendments, but to try to secure a majority that will approve those amendments. And on this case, I call also the vibrant, very active Armenian civil society to write to all the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee to send their strong voice, their requests of justice for this situation, crimes, and to ensure, therefore, that they will see that there is a strong popular pressure also in that regard, because I think that the voice of the European Union, again, should be coherent with these values. And if we will adopt two reports in which we will use two different languages, I will not see where that coherence could be. Therefore, I will really strong call, and we will do our really best to ensure the result. I'm confident we will be able to amend this report in a proper way, but we expect, of course, a significant discussion and political fight within the committee to achieve the result, but we are confident we could make it.
Այս կետին ավելցնեմ, որ բարոն Կաստալդոն ասավ հիմա, ինչ կվերապերի Ադրբեջանի զեկուցումին համար, իրավունք ունի, իրենք պիտի փորձեն, բայց նաև մենք ալ մեր գարկին թե խոսեգած երեսփոխաններով եւ թե հատմեծ թիվով երեսփոխանները, որոնք մեզի գազ կնան իրականությունը չեն գաշարվի Ադրբեջանի ուզած ծևերով, այդ երեսփոխաններուն է պիտի աշխատի նաև մեր գրասենյակը, որովհետեւ պատրաստենք հարկավոր առաջարկները իրենց մեր տեսակետներով, որ անշուշտ հատկետ իրենց հարցն է, եթե կընդունին իրեն գադոնք առաջ տանեն կամ ոչ, բայց ճիշտ է բարոն Կաստալդոյն ասածը, մենք ամբողջությամբ մեր գրասենյակը պիտի գործակցի, մեր դնորենուի հեղինակայի գլխավորությամբ պատրաստելու բոլոր հարկավոր առաջարկությունները, որովհետեւ մենք փոխանցենք երեսփոխաններուն արի օգտագործում։
Ես համանում եմ ճշտել նաև, դուք այցեշրջանախում արդյոք չեք մեկնել, չմեկնելու պատճառը արդյոք դուք եք որոշել չմեկնել, թե Հայաստանում են փոխ տվել, եւ եթե դուք եք որոշել, արդյոք ցանկացել եք խուսափել Ադրբեջանի անդրանքից։
No, simply at that moment was not possible, but in general, we hope to have another mission very soon. Probably we are planning that to do that in February, and if the situation will allow, we'll be of course very glad, absolutely glad to also to go to Artsakh. Simply, it was not possible at that moment for the schedule also of the members that were taking part to the mission.
Do you think one day there civil observers can or should be followed by peacekeepers between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
Well, to have proper peacekeepers on the ground, you need, of course, to have the agreement of both sides. And if you look at these monitoring missions, it's clear that despite a formal agreement, the Azerbaijan authorities didn't allow the deployment of the observers. So if they didn't allow the deployment of observers, I would be skeptical on the fact that they will allow the deployment of peacekeepers. Therefore, of course, theoretically, that would be important to have also peacekeepers, because they would be the best way, the best mean to ensure and to avoid any violence. And I would be glad to see European peacekeepers on the ground, because that would be a very concrete sign of the European commitment towards a peaceful resolution of the conflict and to avoid any further escalation. But this depends not simply on our will. We should have three wills around the table: a European one, Armenian one, and an Azeri one. If not all the three are fulfilled, it will be difficult to do that. And once more, we need to have a diplomatic, strong commitment and work to ensure that this possible future outcome will be also put in place. It's not going to be easy, but nevertheless, this is a very pertinent question, and effectively we should try to push for an evolution on this mission also towards that direction, and hoping that we will be able to secure a consensus of all the parties involved around that.
Արդյոք հնարավոր է ներկայացման դիտողներին ժամկետը երկարացնել, արտադրության ժամկետը երկարացնել Ադրբեջանի համաձայնությամբ, եւ եթե Ադրբեջանը օրինակ այս երկու ամսվա ընթացքում սպասություն չցուցաբերի եւ ագրեսիա կրկին ցուցաբերի, այդ արձանագրությունները, որոնք պետք է կազմվեն դիտողների կողմից, ինչ են տալու Հայաստանի ինչ ձևով հնարավոր լինելու զսպել Ադրբեջանին։ Ագրեսիայի մասին խոսքը այս երկու ամսվա ընթացքում։
First of all, about the consensus, well, as far as we do not see consensus on the deployment on Azerbaijan side, but still there is a deployment on Armenian side, I think that if Armenia will continue to give its consensus, I don't see any troubles, any problems in extending the mission in this format, as long as of course at least Armenia will continue to be in favor of that. In terms of what can be the practical outcome of the monitoring mission, if there will be any other violence, if there will be any other attack, if the attack will be really registered, seen and proved by our monitoring observers, of course that will be a major fact, because there will be again an extremely objective witness of the situation, and also a very objective witness of the responsibility, because you are aware that there were some narratives saying that no, they were not acting, they were just responding to provocation. But if the monitoring observer will testimony with their presence that there was no provocation at all, and that they were simply acting for other purposes, that in my opinion should immediately lead the European Union to strengthen its action, to do further steps towards the aggressor. We said in many other contexts that there is always a difference between the aggressor and aggressed. And I do not see why that difference could not be underlined and could not trigger different actions also in that case. It's also, again, once more, a matter of coherence.
Ինչպես նշեցիք, եթե Հայաստանը համաձայնություն տա, դուք կարող եք եկած գտնվելը, իսկ հնարավորություն կա ավելի շատ քանակի դիտորդներ Հայաստանում ուզելու համար։
Yes, I think so. It's of course it is possible. We need to do the technical steps to do that, to prepare that mission that was in this moment quickly deployed using some resources that were already in place in the region. Because as I mentioned before, those were observers deployed in Georgia that has been transferred now on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I think that with some additional time it will be possible to recruit and to deploy trained personnel and trained staff to enlarge the mission and to ensure that the coverage of the line of contact will be adequate to ensure that they will be present in every single Armenian region, they will be present in every dangerous side of the line of contact. So yes, it's a matter of political will, and I truly believe that the European Union should show political will and commitment in that regard, and should have the best operational mission on the ground to fulfill the goal to prevent violences.
դիտողներ ավանդերան դուրս լինելու էին Հայաստանի Հանրապետության սուվերեն տարածքում, որովհետև նրանք 130-40 կիլոմետր մտերել են տարածք, եւ եթե դիտողները գային առաքելություն անելու, ուրեմն նրանք նորից լինելու էին պարզապես իրենց դիրքերից այն կողմ, բայց դա նորից լինելու է մեր տարածքը։ Եվ մենք երջանիկ կլինենք, եթե դուք այդ փաստը ֆիքսեիք նաեւ տեղաշինության մեջ, որ երկարացնելու եք շնորհակալություն։
Yes, you're right. In some cases, of course, they are not deployed, in fact, formally on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but on somehow in the line of contact that is now in some parts of Armenia within the border of what is the international recognized Republic of Armenia. Of course, we have no means to enforce them to be on the other side, because that would imply the use of military power and deployment of troops that is not on the table right now, and so it's not possible. But you're right, this is also from the juridical point of view a very good point. In that case, some cases they are invading sovereign territorial land, and on both sides and that's why I was often using the word line of contact. I didn't say on the internationally recognized border, but I say the word line of contact exactly to express that they are, let's say, on the front line of what's on one side where the two military forces are now confronted, but of course we remind that the European Union recognized Armenia within its internationally recognized borders, including those areas of several of 200, more or less 200 square kilometers that are actually now illegally occupied.
Հայաստանի կառավարությունը մի քանի անգամ նշել է ժամանակահատվածի նպատակով, որ առաջին հերթին ապահովեն հաղթահարելի անվտանգությունը, իրավունքները։ Մենք հստակ գիտենք, որոնց տեսնում ենք նաև, որ Ադրբեջանը չի կարող ապահովել հաղթահարելի անվտանգությունը, եթե Արցախը որպես Ադրբեջանի կազմում։ Եվրոպական խորհուրդը այս մասով ունի ինչպես այդ քննարկումները անում են, ինչպես է հնարավոր ապահովել ապահովել քաղաքացիների անվտանգությունը, եթե այդ Արցախը չեն ճանաչում որպես անկախ պետություն։
Well, let me say that I cannot speak on behalf of the European Council. I can just speak on behalf of myself as a member of the European Parliament. And I can remind that the European Parliament in many cases was expressing in its own resolution the fact that if Azerbaijan is not able to ensure for its own citizens the full respect of freedom of opinion, freedom of fundamental rights and freedom of expression, well, I would have personally huge doubts to think that it can ensure that ones of the ethnical Armenian that are or originally from Artsakh. Therefore, I truly believe that, especially taking into account the actions that we saw in the last years, that would not be a solution that could allow the full respect of the fundamental rights of those people. I'm quite skeptical in that regard, but I remind that I cannot speak at all on behalf of the Council, nor on behalf of the Council of the European Union, nor on behalf of the Parliament as a whole. I speak on behalf of myself as a member of the European Parliament and as a politician. And in my personal perspective, as I told you, I do not think that this situation could ensure the protection of these people. I must admit that I do not have all the details to answer to your question, and I can recommend you to raise that question to the permanent representative of the European Union here in Yerevan, because I'm pretty sure that he will be able to share with you all the necessary data. As I said, what I can say as a politician is that our presence, our deployment should be coherent with the purpose of the mission. And probably 40, it is not the maximum we can do. It is not maybe what the intensity, as you were mentioning, of the situation now requires to be effective. That's why I strongly advocate, once more, I reiterate what I said many times, I would call to strengthen the mission on its temporary dimensions, so from temporary to permanent, and on the number of trained staff deployed, but I'm not in the condition to express a precise number. I would just say that I would call for the most ambitious mission as possible, as the situation requires, to fulfill the goal, to prevent a further escalation, to prevent violence, and therefore to protect the civilians you know that could be involved in the future clashes.
Շնորհակալ ենք ձեր ներկայության համար, շնորհակալ ենք նաև բարոն Կաստալդոյին եւ մյուս իր գործընկերներին, Պետեր Վանդալենին եւ Լարս Բերգեն, որ եկան Հայաստան, ինչպես ասավ արդեն բարոն Կաստալդոն, փետրվարի վերջին շաբաթվա համար նախատեսած ենք նոր առաքելություն, արդեն բավական երեսփոխաններու հետ կապի մեջ ենք եւ գագնգալ ենք, որ ավելի մեծ թիվով դիլա եւ անադեն արիդը պիտի ունենանք նաեւ Արցախը տալու, քանի գիտեք, որ այս պահուն Արցախ այցելելը ոչ հայկական մասնակիրով կարելի չէ կամ շատ դժվար է, այդպես որ ուսանք մինչև փետրվար, հաջորդ տարվա փետրվար պայմաններ ավելի լավ կլան, իրենք կուզեին անբաժանար Արցախը տալ, Արտենեսի Վանդալեն Արցախի խումբի համանախագահ է, նույնը պիտի փորձեն գնել նաև կալ տարի փետրվարին։ Շնորհակալ ենք եւ հաջողություն բոլորին։
Thank you, merci շատ։